Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Advantest. You often hear them called the ultimate picks and shovels company in the semiconductor world. They're not making the actual AI chips, but they build the incredibly complex machines that test them.
Exactly. And that testing part, which, used to be seen as just cyclical, up and down, now it's becoming structurally critical. Advantest isn't just riding the semiconductor wave anymore. They're being lifted by this fundamental shift in, well, how silicon works economically.
Yeah, that's really the core of what we found looking into this. Our mission today is to figure out why this company, Advantest, which has been around a while, is suddenly seeing this huge growth spurt. So much so that they just revised their financial guidance upwards, and they updated their big three-year plan, MTP3, just in October 2025. And the hook really seems to be all about the massive, unavoidable complexity of AI hardware.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
When you dig into their latest financials, the story they're telling is that demand is actually accelerating faster than even their optimistic models predicted. They're beating expectations almost entirely because of these next-gen AI chips and high-performance computing stuff.
So let's back up a bit. Who is Advantest? Their core identity, they've had it for decades, is enabling leading-edge technologies. Founded in Japan, but make no mistake, they are absolutely a global player now.
Well, they were kind of forced into going global faster, you could say. The real turning point was acquiring Verigy. That was back in 2011. That one move fundamentally changed the company's DNA. Almost overnight, nearly half their workforce and eventually way more than half were non-Japanese employees.
Right, which must have meant that the old, maybe Japan-centric way of managing just wouldn't work anymore.
Exactly. They had to centralize things like HR, standardize processes globally, really commit to operating as one international company. It was basically a strategic necessity, especially when you consider that consistently. Over 96% of their sales come from outside Japan.
Wow, 96%. So where does the money actually come from? What are the main business lines?
Okay, so the biggest chunk is semiconductor and component test systems. That means mainly SOC testers, system on chip and memory testers. Then you've got the supporting pillars, mechatronics, which is like the physical handling equipment, device interfaces, and services, which is, maintenance, support, and also includes system level test, or SLT, which we should definitely talk more about. That's a growing piece.
And it sounds like their leadership really gets this long-term global picture. You see it in their planning documents like the Grand Design and this MTP3 we mentioned. They seem, uniquely focused on sustained growth, even if it means not maximizing profit every single quarter.
Oh, absolutely. They prioritize strategic investment, R&D, M&A. They're willing to spend even when they see a downturn coming in the broader semiconductor market. They don't just slash costs aggressively. The CEO often talks about people being the company's foundation, and that ties directly into their core value of integrity. Which makes sense, right? If you're selling systems that need to guarantee near-perfect chips, your own internal culture has to reflect that same level of quality and reliability.
Okay, let's really dig into that complexity you mentioned, because this seems to be the fundamental shift Advantest is writing. What makes testing a chip today so much harder, exponentially harder than even 5 years ago?
Oh, the change is just, it's staggering. We're talking about the time it takes to test one high-end AI processor or HPC component. That time has increased by up to, get this, 100 times over the last decade or so. It's not just more chips being made. The individual chips are becoming almost untestable with the old methods.
100 times. That's an exponential curve right there. It almost guarantees demand for Advantest's gear, even if chip production volume flattens out for a bit. So what are the technical hurdles driving that massive increase?
It's like hitting multiple walls at once. There's the I/O wall, just handling the sheer volume and speed of data moving in and out. There's the power wall, dealing with massive power consumption and the heat that generates. That's a huge one. Maybe the biggest driver lately is this move towards 2.5D and 3D chiplet integration.
Chiplets. Okay, help us visualize that. What are we talking about?
Think of it like, instead of trying to cram every single function onto one giant complex piece of silicon, you build specialized little chip tiles or chiplets, and then you stack them or place them very close together on a base layer, like high-tech Lego. This gives you huge performance boosts and actually helps with manufacturing yields for complex designs. But stacking them creates brand new problems, especially intense hotspots where they connect and failure modes that only show up when these chiplets are all talking to each other under heavy load.
Ah, okay. So the traditional testing, just checking if individual circuits work in isolation, that suddenly isn't enough. It misses these interaction problems.
Precisely. And that's why Advantest is pushing so hard on system-level test, SLT. That's kind of the new frontier. SLT tests the chip in an environment much closer to how it will actually be used, like inside a server in a data center under realistic workloads.
Why does that matter so much to the chip buyers, Advantest's customers?
It really comes down to cost and risk. Plain and simple. Imagine you have a massive data center running a huge AI training model.
Yeah.
Thousands of these expensive processors working in parallel.
Right.
If just one of those processors fails mid-job, the entire run, which might have cost millions in compute time already, has to be scrapped and restarted.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a massive cost.
Astronomical. So customers are demanding DPPM defective parts per million. It's basically approaching zero. Zero defect is the goal. Traditional 8EE, automated test equipment, just couldn't catch all the system-level issues. SLT fills that critical gap. And Advantest has been smart about this, bulking up their SLT capabilities, partly through acquisitions like Astronix Test Systems Business and SA.
And they're also trying to connect the dots, linking the design phase with the testing phase using software now.
Yes, that's part of their bigger automation strategy. They recently launched something called Semiconductor. The idea is to integrate the test data and process across the whole value chain, from the initial chip design and simulation, through wafer testing, package testing, and that final system-level test. It's about using feedback loops, using data to make the whole process faster and more efficient, which again ties back to their MTP3 goals for sustainable leadership. It certainly helps that their main platform, the V93000, is famously modular. It can be configured to test everything from simple display drivers up to these monster AI GPUs. That flexibility is key.
Okay, speaking of global scale, let's talk geography. Over 96% of sales outside Japan. Where are these machines actually going?
Predominantly Asia, Taiwan, China, South Korea, those are the big ones, driven by the major foundries and memory makers there. But yeah, their performance is totally linked to capital spending decisions being made by companies headquartered in the US, Europe, and Asia. It's a truly interconnected ecosystem.
So how does the whole geopolitical situation, specifically the US-China tech tensions, play into this for a Japanese company that's so global?
Yeah, something they definitely have to navigate carefully. First off, their market position is strong. Globally, they're estimated to have around 58% of the total ATE market share. And in the really high-end stuff, SO testers for AI HPC and memory testers, their share is even higher, probably over 60%. Their main global competitor you hear about is Teradyne.
But I remember seeing something about China specifically. There's a bit more nuance there.
That's right. While Advantest still dominates the high-performance end in China, you are seeing local Chinese ATE suppliers gaining ground, particularly in the lower-end, less complex SO circuit segments. They compete more on price for less demanding applications. It's a potential long-term challenge for Advantest's overall share if those local players manage to move up the complexity ladder. For now, Advantest still owns the high end.
And what about U.S. export controls? Do those hit Advantest the same way they hit American equipment makers?
Advantest's public statements suggest that since a lot of their R&D and manufacturing isn't actually in the U.S., the direct impact of specific U.S. export rules on their equipment is somewhat limited. But they're definitely not immune to the broader effects. The biggest risk for them isn't necessarily that their specific machine gets banned somewhere. It's more the risk of supply chain disruptions, fragmentation, or just a general global economic slowdown triggered by these tensions. That would reduce chip manufacturing overall, which naturally reduces demand for testing.
Right. And their strategic response to all this volatility seems interesting too, moving from just-in-time towards just-in-case for their own supply chain.
Yeah, this is a really significant move, kind of counter-cyclical thinking. They've substantially increased their own production capacity, and they've explicitly called this expansion permanent. They know the AI and HPC markets are prone to sudden, sharp swings in demand. So they've decided it's better to have the capacity ready to go to meet those sudden spikes immediately, rather than sticking strictly to just-in-time and potentially missing out on huge orders when the demand surges. It's a bet on the long-term structural growth.
And that bet, that preparation, seems to be paying off big time. Which brings us right to the latest financial news from October 2025. What did those Q2 results tell us?
Well, following really strong results for the second quarter of their fiscal year 2025, Advantest didn't just beat expectations. They went ahead and revised their full-year guidance upward. And, crucially, they also bumped up the targets for their entire MTP3 plan, which runs through fiscal 26. Sales were near record levels, significantly better than they had forecast.
Okay, but I saw that the SAC tester sales actually dipped a little bit from Q1 to Q2. They said that was because they'd pulled some deliveries forward into Q1. So what drove the big beat in Q2 then?
High-performance memory, specifically HBM high-bandwidth memory. This is the specialized stacked DRAM that sits right next to the big AI GPUs in data centers. It's essential for feeding the beast, so to speak. And because HBM involves stacking multiple memory dies, it's a 3D integration challenge. The testing requirements are incredibly intense, complex, and time-consuming. So demand for Advantest's advanced memory testers, particularly for HBM, just went through the roof. It perfectly validates their strategic focus on tackling complexity.
So the MTP3 revision, updating their 3-year plan, it's not just them catching up to reality. It's a statement that they believe this AI-driven trend is accelerating even faster than they thought just a few months ago.
Absolutely. They're essentially signaling their confidence that this combination of factors, structurally high AI demand, their dominant market share in the critical high-end segments, and their newly expanded production capacity means the good times are likely to continue right through fiscal 2026. They even explicitly raised their forecast for the entire SOC tester market size for calendar year 2025. That's basically them saying, yep, the AI boom is even bigger than we all thought.
Okay, makes sense. Finally, let's quickly touch on shareholder returns. With all this growth and heavy investment, how are they treating their investors?
They've got a pretty clear policy. There's a floor for the annual dividend JPY 30 per share. But the bigger picture is their MTP3 target. They aim for a cumulative total return ratio that's dividends plus share buybacks combined of at least 50% over the 3 years of the plan. And to show they mean business, they just increased the interim dividend for fiscal 2025 to JPY 29 per share. That's up quite a bit from JPY 19 the year before. Plus, they've got a sizable share buyback program planned for fiscal 2025 around JPY 70 billion.
That does sound like a strong signal of confidence from management. Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive, Advantest seems to have successfully navigated this big shift. They've leveraged the almost irreversible trend of increasing chip complexity. They've moved from being just a cyclical player to benefiting from real structural growth, driven by this urgent global need for basically perfect components for the AI build-out.
Yeah, their strategic moves, globalization after Verigy, expanding capacity proactively, focusing on the toughest testing challenges like SLT and HBM. It means they're positioned to capture value even when overall chip volumes might fluctuate, because the testing intensity per chip keeps going up. That creates a strong baseline of demand for their most advanced systems.
Which leads us nicely to our final thought for you, the listener. Advantest lists integrity as its #1 corporate value. And their customers, building these AI systems, demand near zero defect reliability. So think about this. In a world increasingly reliant on massive AI data centers, what is the actual hard economic value of that integrity? The value of ensuring every single tiny component is tested perfectly? And how does that absolute requirement for quality shape the risks and the potential rewards for the entire digital economy going forward? Something to chew on as you watch this space.